We take great pleasure in that moment when the audience decides for us that we've begun. So thank you for cueing me. My name's Charles Waldheim. It's my pleasure to serve as the John E. Irving Professor of Landscape Architecture and co-direct the Master in Design Studies program here at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. This is an event that's been on my calendar for some time that I've been looking forward to because it represents a collaboration with the Boston Public Art Triennial. Among other things, you may know that the Triennial is a startup. It's a new idea launched this year, an extraordinary contribution of public art to the civic life of this city, and also an opportunity for us at the GSD to partner with them. A quick reminder before we get started that we have live captioning available for our audiences, both here in the room and those joining virtually. If you're joining virtually, you'll see a closed captioning icon near the bottom of the live stream window that you can click on. And if you're here in person, there's a QR code there bottom left that you can link to. And if you have any difficulties technically, please visit the AV booth upstairs where Sarah and Matt are on the ones and twos. We'd also like to invite you to join us for a couple of upcoming public programs in our series. Beginning next Wednesday, October 22nd, please join editors Jeannie Gang and Lizbeth Cohen for the release event of Harvard Design Magazine number 53 that they've co-edited on the topic of reuse and repair here in Piper Auditorium. The following Thursday, October 23rd, we'll host a lecture by Miriam Chabani. She is the Aga Khan design critic in architecture, and her talk, South-South Cosmogonies, will feature the work of her award-winning practice, New South. And for more information about our robust program of public events, please check out the GSD website. Now, you noticed as you came in to Piper Auditorium some swag on the table. Please help yourself. You'll see there, among other things, the GSD's Fall Public Programs program, which has been translated into the, is it 60, Sarah? 34, thank you. There I go, overestimating things. The 34 languages spoken here in the GSD. This is the design work of our art director, Chad Klopfer at the GSD. You'll also see this incredible fold-out map designed by Sienna Scarf of Sienna Scarf Design, locating all of the public artworks in the Triennial. And you'll be looking for numbers 8, I believe, featuring Patrick's work. So we've organized this in 2 portions. We're going to invite Patrick to the word in a minute. Patrick Martinez will share with us some of the context of his work and his work coming from Los Angeles and what he's contributed to the Triennial. And then we'll be joined by Pedro Alonso and Malkit Shoshan. Pedro Alonso is an independent curator and the artistic director for this inaugural edition of the Boston Public Art Triennial. He has served as a curator and an art director on a range of public projects. He's also taught here at the GSD and is really a kind of leading international expert on the role of public art in terms of social critique and activism. Malkit Shoshan is design critic in urban planning. She was the 24-25 Senior Loeb Scholar, was a resident in 2024 at the Rockefeller Foundation's Bellagio Center. She's a design researcher and writer. She is founding director of a think tank called FAST, that is a Foundation for Achieving Seamless Territory, and her work engages the space between architecture, planning, and human rights. In 2021, Shoshan was awarded the Silver Lion at the Venice Architecture Biennial for a collaborative project on border ecologies and the Gaza Strip. And so we're really thrilled to have Pedro and Malkit joining us in conversation with Patrick Martinez. Patrick Martinez is an artist known for his nimbleness across various media, from landscape paintings to neon sign pieces, cake paintings, and the P-Cheese series, which documents threats to black and brown youth by law enforcement. His landscape paintings blend Los Angeles' surface elements to evoke place and socioeconomic themes. His neon sign works remix words from literary sources, and in this instance, transcriptions from conversations with homeless here in Boston that he'll say more about today. His work has been exhibited, installed, and acquired widely, and we're so very, very fortunate to have him joining us this evening. Please welcome Patrick Martinez.
Hello, everyone. I just want to give a quick overview. As Charles said, just like give some context of where I'm coming from. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. So like the first opening image I always kind of use or think about was when I started making art, my entry point was drawing. But after that, my first kind of entry point to painting was graffiti. And I always thought that was a kind of, I'm 45 now, and I think back to that a lot. You know, at 11 or 12 years old, manipulating a medium that was sold at a hardware store to make a painting on a wall that you didn't belong to you, you know. So I look back at that because I'm thinking about how that informs my work now, even unconsciously, how it creeps into the work. And there's brush strokes in there that are real obvious, but I think my art making, how I approach landscapes and other mediums, it comes from observation and the observation of the land, and how I traversed it, you know, as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, getting on the bus and going to different parts of Los Angeles and kind of painting in different secluded yards and old train yards and spending hours there and just trying to, you know, create paintings with friends. But from the, you know, we would end up on rooftops and different things, painting, and from that vantage point, you could see the city a little differently. I went to Art Center College of Design, and I was painting a lot. I was drawing and painting the figure, and I knew that I wanted to make work that, you know, that I wasn't seeing. So this piece was like 2005. This kid with a bulletproof vest on, you know, at the bus stop. So it's kind of early works that I was, you know, thinking about the landscape and the people in it. Some of the, you know, context and inspiration for the neon works and how it started creeping into the landscape work that I'm making. A lot of the storefronts would have this kind of adornment of neon in the front, and in Los Angeles, specifically the east side. And I would think about it as, you know, when I would drive down about 2005, 6, traffic is so heavy in Los Angeles, you would wait till nighttime. And I would drive down Whittier Boulevard to get to my apartment in Montebello, and I would see all these neon signs on. And there wouldn't be anyone in the shops, but they would be advertising that small mom and pop business, you know, like Notary Public, Checks Cash, Laundromat. So I wanted to use that kind of direct kind of use of graphic neon text to kind of speak to the passerby. So this is the stuff that I'm pulling from, even the layering with like, you know, the window in front of the neon. You can see in some of the paintings that I make, the security bars, things like that. Thinking about it as sculpture. This is the Flower District in Los Angeles, and you know, everywhere in LA, I'm just pulling from stucco, textures, the way people are trying to sell things and communicate that they're, you know, they have bouquets of flowers for funerals and other things, arrangements, putting them directly on the wall is kind of, or, you know, I was thinking about that kind of the, you know, kind of combination and the collaging of, you know, some of the elements that I use, even the banner tarp text and all this. Lots of neon in LA, even though that it's not being used widely now. I think of myself as kind of an archivist in that way, just using these materials that are disappearing from the cityscape. Neon, ceramic, tile, even textures and colors, and the absence of graffiti, all of it. You could just see, it's just, you know, samples of things that I'm kind of like drawn to and kind of, you know, inspired by neon that works. How do you know, what can you do? Neon is very graphic, and there's only like, you know, so many colors, right? There's not a lot of nuance in it. So, you know, how do you redact text, and what is it next to? You can turn it off, you can light it up. Just, you know, lots of inspiration. The Peachy folder kind of came in when I was a young kid going to middle school, all into high school as well. I just put it next to the neon because it was just like, you know, inspiration, things that I would kind of take from, showing context. And This is the first Peachy folder drawing that I did. This was 2005. And there were drawings, and then I turned it into a silkscreen. They got a little bit more complex, and, started painting them on panel, like, wanting to command that kind of importance. When you paint something on canvas or panel, people, I guess, pay attention, right? Especially if it's done in a way where it'll stop someone and, say that the time was spent on that articulating form or whatever, likeness. This is the outcome. This was 2015, so like I think a whole 10 years later, I started painting these works on panel. This is Inglewood High. And a lot of the work that I make, even, when Pedro hit me up about the project, I was already doing work on the ground, meaning that I wasn't interested. I mean, I was interested in showing in galleries and museums, but it wouldn't just stop there. I wanted to bridge to people that weren't coming to those spaces, because I was speaking to them. Even just the passerby, look, with the neon, that's who I'm talking to, the people in the street kind of walking by the neon and kind of checking it out. I would create folder prints of these paintings that I was making and kind of inject them back into the community, and giving prints out to unsuspecting, high school students or college students. And there's a function to it, right? So they would just throw their papers in it, and most of these kids thought I was selling a mixtape or something back. They were just like, "I'm good, man," and it's like, "Oh, it's just a print," that we did some for UCLA in the uprising in the 90s, and that was a big part of my, and in LA, it was like, it informed a lot of what we were the temperature of things and how things were going to feel and go, and how in the 80s it was like this. For me, it was like in LA, it was like this kind of idealized version. The cops would come to your school, everyone wanted to be a cop, and then the 90s was the reality. You seeing it captured in, it was a camcorder, grainy footage. This is in the Bronx. Landscape, looking at landscape, thinking about, the buying and selling of land, and using some of those, that messaging to kind of stretch on canvas, stretch on panel, and use that as a painting substrate, spray painting on it, painting it out, using it on top of, stucco, all kinds of methods, signage in, I think this is Pico Union District in Los Angeles. So just kind of like the overlays, right? Like the things that are kind of around you, and people are kind of just looking at as background, but I'm kind of like pulling from the way things are arranged, and the fact that this cornucopia, like of fruits and all that, feels like a still life in art history or something. I'm finding these materials and kind of cues around the city, and kind of using them. Even the ceramic tile that I'm using, there's a history there with ceramic use in art, and the neon has a through line in art, in art also. This is an early painting. I just wanted to show kind of where I started, where I was going, kind of the evolution. Lots of signage around LA, playing with like icons built in, like, palm trees and paradise and keys, and a lot of the work that is in Boston now is inspired by, like, a lot of these locksmith neon signs. And this is one of the first, early at Charlie James Gallery, this was one of the first arrangements that I did. And this was back in 2016 or 17, something like that. And it's just kind of how I arrange the work, is how I kind of sampled it in the city, kind of collaged together in the window. There's a lot of the storefronts are kind of like using all the real estate that they have in the window to kind of advertise what they're doing. And they came from me. This is from 2017, or actually 2016. More inspiration. Show you where I'm pulling from. Tarps, and I like the tarp on the left because it had palm trees in it, and I used that. I bought it off the people that were that have this shop, and I'll use it, kind of stretch it on the canvas or panel. This is just something, a screen grab that I took early, say 2015 or something like that, and just kind of how the neons are kind of really utilize every inch of the window. And just so you know where I'm pulling from and just how I compose. This is at the Whitney Museum, the front lobby. They acquired this work and they hung it, I guess, like, it was pretty quickly. AKG Museum of Buffalo. And, you know, this is kind of, I think this is pandemic 2000, 2001, but I'm using the neon and kind of breaking it apart and thinking about storefronts. This was kind of inspired by the George Floyd protests in Los Angeles. Just like the Peachy folders, a lot of the signage that I made a lot of the neon signs, and they would sit in spaces like a museum or gallery, and how can I use it to try to like get out into the real world, you know, and I thought about lawn signs during the pandemic, and it was an election cycle, so I was thinking there's signs that I'm making so I can kind of translate into this kind of lawn sign, so people can kind of like push back, I guess, when they're just hanging out inside and, you know, they're not able to get out. But that turned into the people kind of taking them off their, you know, their steel stand and then going to protest. So I started going to protests, and I would, you know, hand them out and things like that. These are all protests from this year, I believe. This is downtown Los Angeles. This is a drawing, a Peachy drawing of all the protests that not that I was at every one of these protests, but I was present at like USC and, you know, UCLA, just, you know, with the handing out of the signs. And then I kind of wanted to make a drawing about it. So this is what I made. So it's kind of like an inner, like I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, you're doing lots of works. But I see like a through line through all of it. It's all connected in a way, and I'm able to kind of like traverse all of those bodies of work and kind of play with them all, some details. And this is all big pen and acrylic paint. This is what we would do like in middle school and high school, just draw, like put your favorite band or like the favorite rap group on your Peachy folder. This is cinder block. It's a panel, but it feels like cinder block, and it's reminiscent of like, you know, something you might find in LA. LA's a mural town, so portraits and backgrounds and graffiti on top of each other, layered painting. A sitting bull on top of an American, was it American Progress? The reference is American Progress, and that painting was used in a travel magazine, and it was promoting, you know, Europeans to come to the United States. So that's depicted in the painting background. This is at the Dallas Contemporary. More of cinder block. I'm thinking about sculpture with cinder block, and how I can find already existing cinder block, or, you know, sculpture, and kind of use it with the painting. Some details. So a lot of the materials, like I said before, it's like the materials that are kind of fleeting the city, or like kind of being replaced almost with other aesthetics. My materials that I choose to use are, you know, almost discounted in a way, or just not looked at as, you know, valuable, I think. Some details. This is more cinder block works. So I'm using spray paint, pressure washers, stucco, tile, LED signs. It's the patchwork. It's like that kind of. It's like collage, like Los Angeles collage. It's all these things. It's all these neighborhoods kind of butting up to each other, and that kind of diverse kind of, that divert. Like, what does that look like or feel like, or in between time of a neighborhood changing? That's kind of what I'm after, and when I'm painting or putting these together. And I imagine myself as just like this, when I'm making these, just like this landscape painter, like Winsor Homer or something, is just kind of like arranging compositions. So I'm using a lot of the references around me, just, plants that would be around me, specific to LA, and mural making kind of concepts. And so like, I guess in the last painting is where the use of neon inside the painting, but I go back and forth with just making signage that speaks graphically in window storefronts, and also, for installations like we were making at the, that we did at the, that are on display at the Triennial. This is from 2017. Redacting text, figuring out ways to play with the neon that the medium that I'm using, and neon is very like seductive medium, and I kind of want to push back on that and use it to kind of like push back, in spaces and when it's on display, because when people have their own experience with neon, and they're just it's not like like I'm used to seeing it, like Tracy Emin or someone that's really using it to kind of, but for me, it's just something like, it's almost like a warning sign or some type of, that evolved into like almost protest yard signs. This is in Dallas. So there's another version of me really just kind of, part of the programming, we're thinking about placing the work in communities in Dallas versus just having the work sit in the museum. I wanted to, kind of have the work spill out into the streets, and not in a street art way or anything. I don't really think of myself like that, but just kind of like utilizing spaces that are already kind of like inspiring or informing my work, and I'm kind of putting them back into the spaces, those types of spaces, and having them in these kind of unexpected, these kind of like serendipitous moments where people will be like, hey, I saw one of your signs, or I don't know if it was one of your signs, or like maybe it is, but I like that kind of that play. And this is Boston, yeah. The church. Yeah, that's all I have. But yeah, we could probably get into the chat now. Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick. That was great. Pedro, let's give the word to you for a few minutes to contextualize, right? So you're a curator in public art in particular, first Triennial in Boston, a place where you live and work. How do you approach art direction, and how do you get to Patrick?
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Patrick. That was great. Well, there are many triennials and biennials around the world. So how do you distinguish one in Boston? And you know, having lived here for so long, I often joke that you can throw a rock and hit an expert, and it's pretty true actually. And I feel like I thought that's actually one of the most interesting things about this community is the not just the level of experts, the amount of experts, right? And I thought that could be a really interesting way to tie into it, to create, you know, there's, and part of it is very selfish. It's also about giving more meaning to my work and what I do. And there are many issues, I mean, we're so many issues these days that we're passionate about and interested in, and tying, giving artists that link to experts that are dealing with the issues that they're interested in, that give them passion, and creating that opportunity. And I thought that would be an interesting way of distinguishing this, and thinking about community in a different way. Thinking about community as the people that are here doing important work, and the outsized impact that the communities of experts in Boston have on the rest of the world. So that's what led me to this idea of the exchange, the idea of exchanging ideas, cultural influence, and not just, sorry for those of you working on a PhD, but not just the PhDs, right? Expertise on a much broader level. People doing grassroots work, people working, you know, helping to make the world a better place, right? And so with these ideas, there were several artists who I've been thinking about. This isn't a linear process, right? This is kind of like a big messy cake, and you know, you kind of bake the cake like that. And Patrick and I, you know, I've admired his work for a long time, been visiting him for a long time, and I've really always liked his neons. I mean, his paintings as well, but the neons I thought were a great thing for public art. And most of Patrick's neons have traditionally been either quotes from famous people. Helen Keller is one of my favorites, which is the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. And then the ones you've made up, like Deport Ice and things like this, or what was it, Korean Soul Food, I think was another one, about hybridity and resilience in his communities. And I asked Patrick, I invited him to think about, would he consider working with a group of people that are facing an issue, some kind of challenge, and derive a series of neons from that. And Patrick agreed, and I immediately say homelessness, you know, homeless youth. Because friends took us to Y2K over here on Church Street, and I was really impressed by this organization that was helping. I didn't realize homeless youth was such an issue. And the Triennial found this organization called Break Time. Break Time is helping to break the cycle of homelessness. They advocate, they job training. And Patrick and I spent 2 days in conversation with these, their associates, you know, young people who are dealing with homelessness. And it was really moving and crazy to think about, you know, the scarcity mindset. You know, someone who would lose, a woman who talked about losing her residence where she lived and then decided to quit her job. I was like, that's like, you know, like that seems like a really bad idea, but she was explaining that this is what happens in that scarcity mindset. So from those conversations, Patrick came up with 12 signs, very powerful signs. And then we had to place them. And Patrick said earlier today, you were like, yeah, I knew it'd be harder to place than you thought it would be. Yeah. And it was tricky to place them, but we can chat about that a little later.
How did you know it would be difficult to place?
Well, it comes with the territory of making work that pushes back, you know, and that's why a lot of what I do is kind of like on the ground, kind of handing it back. And there's no kind of like, you don't have to do a Zoom call for that, or, you know, take a meeting or something. I just kind of do it and place the work in people's hands. And, you know, the lawn signs, all of it's, you know, all of that's work, even though the folders kind of does that. Once you start, you know, trying to place it in spaces and the work pushes back, it becomes complicated because there's a lot of people that have to approve things, and it's gonna, the messaging is something that people don't want to talk about often because it's something that the distance is close, right? It's there, and so that conversation, it's a heavy one to have, especially with something where you're just trying to get to work, and it's kind of like a thought, that kind of is just in the window and makes someone think. And I don't know if placing in that context of a window is something that these store owners, these people that own these spaces are probably wanting to. They're not trying to have that conversation. Yeah.
I mean, I loved what you said about while your work moves across media, there's a through line that's evident when you speak about it. Pedro, one of the conversations that we've had before in our collaboration with the Gardner Museum, but also more recently when you come to teach here, has to do with whatever the social message, whatever the politics of the project, it's got to be damn good art. Can you say something more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times, the challenge for art, especially public art, is that we get so wrapped up in the idea and in the cause and in the people who are making it and in the community that we forget that it has to be a great work of art. If you want a reaction, the most important thing is to work with an artist that can deliver an impactful artwork. And that's not so easy. A lot of my job is, traveling around the world looking for artists that I think are committed to it and can deliver. Because still today, most artists are not thinking about public space. They're thinking about galleries and museums. So, and it's, it's not an easy thing as an artist to break out of that, circuit. So for me, it's about offering an opportunity to do something really exciting and great. And but I can't stress how important that is. And one of the biggest challenges in making it happen are the concessions, because there are inevitably concessions come up when people say, "Oh, can you do this? And can it be that? And this is too, this is kind of aggressive." And da da da. Well, that's the point, right? And well, we don't want to offend anyone. Actually, don't worry about offending anyone, because we are going to offend someone, and that's okay, right? This is not about making everybody happy. I say that all the time. It makes some people uncomfortable, but the fact is that, public art isn't about making everyone comfortable. It's about putting a great work out there that makes a meaningful statement that gets people to talk. And you achieve that.
Among the things that you're implying, I want to draw you out on, is, are there challenges with taking an artist out of their, let's say, context, their cultural context, their social context, and bringing a social message into a very different kind of place, right? So, Patrick, you do this amazing work with these kind of tableaus, these kind of landscape. You conjure up these LA, Southern California landscapes in such beautiful, powerful poetry. Are there challenges in bringing that to, our fair town? Or how do you approach the kind of, maybe balance is too leading a term, but how do you deal with the fact that Boston we're filled with cultural institutions. We got plenty of artists. There are people here in these communities that also want a voice. How do you think about that from your work?
Well, I actually do think it's about a balance, and I often describe myself as a matchmaker, right? Thinking about what artists are doing, learning about their work, and what's happening out in the world that can tie to it and give it meaning and context and make it interesting. And it sounds simple. It's not, but that's how it works. So I'm hearing what Patrick is saying, observing his work, and then realizing, okay, we can do something really interesting. And one of the challenges we had here is that we were going to the wrong people. the Triennial has great relationships with real estate owners, but real estate owners are not going to go for this kind of work. So we kept going to them, and they kept saying things like, "Oh yeah, we want to be part of it, sure." And then we show them the work, and they'd be like, "Ugh, no, we thought you'd send us something, give us something more whimsical." Yeah, they're used to those pink inflatable babies, right? So of course, a sign that says, economic violence, homeless, is problematic.
You were surprised that the real estate development community
I know,
was
so
not wanting to lead with a message
you
about
have to go into
homelessness.
these things naive and optimistic to make them work.
I mean, among the things I find so interesting, Patrick, and what you're saying about your practice is that you begin by observing things in the public realm from the street, from the storefront. And then you draw this work out, but then put it back behind glass again. Right? There's a very interesting, for me, inside-outside question. And so for me, the thought process is, to what extent is putting it in a storefront? So two of Patrick's work are here in Cambridge, right? So Middlesex on Mass Ave and Miracle of Science, numbers 8 on the map.
Yeah.
Do you think about that behind the glass, making it more private or owned? Or how do you think about its putative publicness?
I don't know. I mean, it's I've always thought about reaching people and speaking to the passerby, especially with the neon works. But any chance I can get, I don't know what it is. I think it probably stemmed from like maybe graffiti, but not in like an ego way, like an egotistical way. Like I was, as a child, I didn't speak. I was very shy, when I was like in middle school and elementary school, and I think art is the way I spoke, the visual kind of language, and that's how I prefer to speak to the city or my city or any city that I'm in. So I think about where I take from, but also placing it back in that context to kind of speak to the people in that city or the city that I live in. But I also think about like the art world and how it could be looked at as like this kind of space people don't understand, and I don't always understand it, but just like that it's an elite kind of like space, and I've always wanted to kind of like because I don't come from that, so I traverse those two kind of terrains, right? Like the art world and the real world, and I want to kind of live in those spaces and not just be exclusive to, the White Cube or, a museum or something like that.
I mean, it strikes me that on the one hand, you've distinguished your work, your mature work, from street art, and at the same moment, you're a kind of distance or a kind of relationship to the kind of gallery world. And, a part of what is interesting there is the basic business model. You opened your remarks tonight by saying that you were working with a wall that was found and a can of spray paint.
Yeah.
And that there was something direct and material as a through line with the plywood and the ceramic work and the block. And there's something interesting about the practice that you've developed, that it pushes in both of those directions. I mean, among the things it's doing is it's critiquing the business model, right? Just to speak in kind of material terms, right? So, Pedro, I know you've thought a lot about this. To what extent is putting work in the public realm enabling it to be more putatively political or social? Is there something about public art that makes it need to be more socially explicit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think... Actually, Swoon is here tonight, the artist Caledonia Curry, and she said it to me once. I was asking her, you're putting work out in public space. Are you trying to tell people something? Is it a message? She said, well, of course it is. Why else would I put it in public space? Yeah. And I thought, so it is about a message, right? It is about reclaiming this space and saying something and sharing something and starting conversations. And, there is public art, right? There's always an element of an imposition, right? Not everyone is happy to have it there, right? And when you put it out there, you're making a statement, right? You are people visit museums, they live in public space. So once it's in public space, you're saying something, right? And some people may not like it, and that's okay. So it is inherently a statement,
Melky, you've thought a lot and done a lot with respect to speech in public space and the relationship between art and design, and let's call it social change or questions of political change. Maybe we could give you the word for a minute, and you can talk a little bit about your practice and how you approach these questions.
I'm not going to speak much about my practice, maybe more about my pedagogy and the issues we are developing and the methods we are developing with the students within a context that is very complex politically, socially, economically. So, for instance, I have about 10 notes and some slides to share with you. Some of these slides are pulled from the class we had this morning, from the Interdisciplinary Art and Design Practices seminar, that is basically focusing on the intersection between design and activism. So I'll just share my notes, and let's see where it gets us. So, and also, thank you very much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. So around my notes, there are a lot of many other notes that I put by hand just in response to your presentation, but I'll stick to my paper, otherwise it will be too long. So in 2021, about 800,000 people in the US were unhoused, depriving them from a fundamental human right to an adequate standard of living. Unfortunately, the design of our cities and the built environment both reflect and reinforce growing socioeconomic divisions. This pattern is evident in many urban areas worldwide. We can address this through artistic interventions, as we've seen here, but also through a variety of spatial design strategies in different scales and different level of engagement. Let me see. So given this context, I will move in a second. I don't really see what is happening behind me, but so given this context, I want to actually focus my response on the relationship between socially engaged artistic practices and the notion of care, using care as a framework to address these inequalities. I will also share some notes that can be addressed maybe later in the conversation. I'll try to be brief, but I have a few things to cover. So care is an ethical and relational practice rooted in responsibility, interconnectedness, and responsiveness to others' needs. It advocates for social justice, supporting both personal and ecological well-being and collective action. So when we talk about care, why we care? We care because human existence is fundamentally relational. Our well-being depends on our relationship with our surrounding environments, and those can be social, economical, cultural environments. And socially engaged art and participatory artistic practices can be understood as practices of care. Both involved tentative listening, emotional engagement, and commitment to addressing the needs of others. And I want to share a few, maybe, references that can help us give examples. So maybe I'm moving a little bit with my notes from art in public space to art in public interest and trying to understand here what does it mean also within the context of our school, where we look at the built environment as a more complex system. So, for example, back in the 70s, when many artists worked on large-scale installation, Mire Laderman Uklis used her art to shift our attention to the dignity of labor, pointing out the parallels between the indignities suffered by women and those endured by sanitation workers. Both are forced to clean up messes they did not create. Her work drew attention to class and gender politics through the mundane task of maintenance and care, whether it's caring for the family, the household chores, daycares, or caring for the city or the environment. So she embedded herself within the New York City Department of Sanitation to highlight these dimensions of inequality. Another words that I want to put out here, and I really loved it in your work, is the act of advocacy. As also we've seen there, art can be a powerful tool to make visible all sorts of social concerns. And Bruno Latour explored this idea under the theme of making things public, arguing that the public realm is a space where issues can be seen and debated. It is where we must make visible what is hidden and marginalized, because only then can social and political realities be truly addressed. And it's critical for our democratic systems. Hannah Arendt also wrote extensively about the space of public appearance. Everything that is seen and heard by others and by ourselves constitute a reality, shape our world. So in this context, again, socially engaged art plays an important role by surfacing hidden realities, sparking dialogue, and challenging dominant narratives. So this is the power of advocacy, of art and advocacy, creating a space not only for confrontation, but also for raising concern and shaping new narratives of a space and a place. And your work looking at, for instance, how culture become more and more contested in this country. So it has another level of both social responsibility and engagement with a broader cultural system, or as a space of a tool of confrontation. And I want to bring, I don't know if it moves, also the work of Agnes Dance, as she planted wheat fields on a former demolition site in Lower Manhattan to critique societal values. Her work addressed issues such as rising inequality, the increased cost of basic commodities, and environmental degradation, all set against the backdrop of Wall Street, the stock exchange, and the Statue of Liberty. So also here it is a powerful reminder of how art can challenge our imagination, our individual and collective imagination, and our understanding of space and society, but also how all of these intersect with care. I'm not sure I'm following the right order. Let's say I do. So artistic practices can help us reclaim a narrative, space, and agency in many different ways. In our schools, students are coming from, again, different cultures and backgrounds. And one issue that remain or might connect us all, and it's to some extent similar to housing, is the theme of reproductive rights. The right of women to make decisions about their bodies, health, economic freedom, and so on, which was already or has been already recognized as a fundamental human right in 1968 at the UN. So one of the work that I'm bringing here, or practices that I want to highlight, is the practice of Rebecca Humpert, who is a Dutch activist, a medical doctor, and artist. She uses art and design to advocate for reproductive freedom, reproductive rights. For that matter, she designed a mobile health clinic together with Atelier van Lieshout, and she sailed it across seas to provide legal and safe abortions. Let's see. So this clinic operates in international waters, where the legal jurisdiction is determined by the registration address of the boat. So her organization also facilitates all sorts of campaigns and projects around this issue of reproductive right, like flying pills with drones from women in one country to women in another country. But one question that I keep having, and there are some precedents that, as the one here, also in relation to the conversation that we had, or the presentation that we heard, and your work with the Triennale, is how we move from isolated ad hoc intervention to systemic change. For example, I brought this practice. It's a collective art group called Alla Plastica, which responded almost like developed a spontaneous response to Argentina's largest oil spill caused by a Shell tanker crash. They were not held accountable by anyone, so they started this spontaneous activism, which led to a long-term interdisciplinary collaboration with scientists, policymakers, and with the community. It eventually resulted in a multi-year legal case against Shell, demanding accountability and cleanup, which they eventually won. Almost there, 2 more slides to go. So in my own practice and pedagogy, I also try to use a range of design strategies, tactics, scales, and interdisciplinary approaches or tools to make visible hidden realities and ask a question in public about decisions that impact the quality of our shared habitat. This involves working on site, engaging policymakers and public institutions in dialogue, and developing processes and alternatives rooted in care to improve lives and protect the environment. So those projects also kind of experimental. They range from the scale of our body to the scale of the household, the city, and broader ecologies, as all of those scales are interconnected. So let me see. Biennales and Triennales, as we've seen, and I actually used and abused my presence in Biennales to kind of initiate all kinds of campaigns, can serve as an important public space and platform embedded in social practice, capable of driving meaningful social change. And the shift from art in public space to art in public interest can become a catalyst for a bigger social transformation. And I want to leave with kind of one last thought or a wonder that I also might have already mentioned. If we do enough, and can we do more? I wonder how we can make room for further experimentation at the intersection of art and design to move beyond ad hoc intervention toward more strategic, systemic approaches, approaches that involve diverse actors, so expert, communities, human, non-human, and as well as institutions, in shaping our shared environment through participatory processes rooted in care, in responsibility, and in collective action.
Thanks for that, Malkit. I mean, among the things that you highlight, among the things that I, see in your pedagogy, I see in your practice, is also related to this notion of exchange, right? So we are now in the context of universities and art museums that are under attack for their exchange of ideas, right? So we're in contexts in which, on a campus like this, or in many institutions around the country, the speech is being policed, and it strikes me that your comments are really quite timely in that regard. I was struck, Patrick, at how much of your work anticipated from 2015, 2016. I mean, what you shared with us was that you've been committed or concerned with these topics for a very long time now. Can you say something about how either your work or the meaning of your work for audiences has changed in the last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's just paying attention, like I've been, it's like observation. It comes with like, observing and drawing. And so when you're paying attention, you start to notice some things. And that's why it came up, I guess, some people say early on for my work. But how it's changed in 5 years, it's more just how it's, like it hasn't changed. Like I'm just continuing to do what I do, but getting, kind of, lots of pushback, right? And certain times of, certain pieces or whatever, and it's definitely like not normal times, and everything's like elevated, and there's a lot of people that are kind of concerned and scared, and you could see it in museums, artists, there's a lot of it. People aren't speaking out as often, maybe, so maybe that has changed, but I continue to do what I do. But there's an urgency. There's always been an urgency, so it's just amplified, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the example of the Peachy folder is a great, I think, this kind of found object, right? That you take out of its cultural context. Between that and the lawn sign, the lawn sign is brilliant, right? I mean, you take this work and it moves in and out of a cultural context and then into an explicit place of protest. Do you accept Malkit's call for art in the public interest? Right? Does that ring true for you?
Yeah, I mean, like if it, yeah, it definitely rings true. Like it's something that I don't know. It's just something that I think about often, and it living there. Yeah,
And equally, your call for art as a form of advocacy.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'd like to hear a little bit more, and we'll open up to your comments and questions in a moment. I want to hear more about the actual practice, right? So you encounter these community organizations that are helping the underhoused, especially underhoused youth, and you get connected with them. It's a very different process than the Helen Keller process.
Yeah, no.
Tell us a little bit about how you got from what must have been transcripts upon transcripts and hours of meetings to these pithy works.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about, Pedro approached me, and it's not typical that I would do something like that. So I was like, oh yeah, well this is different. This has to be like a bullhorn, right? Like just hand over the bullhorn and let them speak. And there's a lot of collectors and things like that have requests with the work that I do, and especially with the neon signage, they're, oh, can you do? And I always, no, that's not how it works. But in this way, I felt like it's how I want to use it, because that's what the work is about. So like doing the meetings and the talks and kind of getting kind of I was just approaching it like that, and kind of transcribing notes and main points that they had, and the things that they were concerned about, or just that came up again and again for each individual, right? And something like and bringing that home, and kind of finding a way to marry already existing signage that people are kind of they already have downloaded, but then kind of changing the messaging, and that was something that it was kind of like a method that was, or kind of a tactic that I was trying to use in some of the signs, in the signage that I was using for the triennial.
I mean, what you said about neon being, not the most refined material, like the material limitations of certain colors. It also signifies culturally a certain you're in a certain environment that allows neon, right? So this kind of zoning, kind of organization of the city logic to that. And I quite like that notion of like somebody might come up to you and say, I think I saw your piece. Was this one of yours?
Right.
And that ability for it to kind of disappear in a way. Either you or Pedro, have you had the opportunity for the folks that you interviewed to reflect on the work? Have they been able to
Not yet.
experience it? Yeah.
Not yet, but that's part of the plan. And I was thinking about your call for advocacy, and I think that one way that this has worked is art has the privilege of attracting media attention, right? It's part of the way the world works. So when an artist works with an expo organization like Break Time, for example, you're bringing attention to their work. There are 2 signs outside of Break Time. Their office is on Franklin Street. But then, we were struggling to find the right partner to work with, and we ended up finding churches, nightclubs, and bars, right? And the bars and nightclubs, well, we're not advocating so much for them. We just go there for a good time. But the churches, right, one of the reasons it came to me was because I was walking down Boylston Street and I saw a sign that said, God loves trans people. And then I started to notice the rainbow flags and the women's lunch group at another church. And I realized that, contrary to my growing up, I grew up in Mexico, where the Catholic Church is the bastion of conservative values. They are not pro-trans, right? There's not a lot going on there in terms of progressive values. But here, it's like the Twilight Zone. It works very differently. So I thought there's a mission alignment here, right? So bringing the artworks to the churches and advocating for the programs that they're already working on, right, the causes that they get behind, is a form of advocacy. Now, I think that there are other ways of developing systemic change, but I also feel that it depends on the project. Some projects can do that. And also, in some ways, some works of art have become tools. So, for example, if you think about the Doomsday Clock, which is the property of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist that signals midnight is kaboom, right? And right now it's at 89 seconds to midnight, the closest it's ever been, even closer than during the Cold War. So this was created by an artist, Elise Lemire. Her husband was a scientist who worked on the Manhattan Project. And they were looking for a visual metaphor to kind of create this idea of the sense of urgency. And they created the Doomsday Clock. So every year, the Doomsday Clock, how close it is to midnight, is announced. And it's a big deal. It's referenced all the time. And for those of you Watchmen fans, you know what I'm talking about, right? So there is that idea. And I think that, again, these can become emblematic, symbolic, and they can help bring change about.
Malki, you referenced the role of art fairs, Biennale, Triennale in these social protest movements. Is there something about the work being temporary? I mean, the work will endure, but presumably not in these locations. Is there something about the work being temporary or in situ for only a limited period of time that changes its status or its effectiveness? Is it more effective by virtue of its limited? And we should remind our audience, when does the Triennale close?
So the Triennale closes October 31st. So the work will be up till then. Some will be up longer. But yes, I think temporary is really important because, we can all go out and look at, after a while that statue gets old, right? And no matter how important it was the moment it was put there, right? After a certain amount of time, the issues change, things change. So I think what I like about temporary is it can be precise. It's like acupuncture. You put it like right where it needs to go, and then you remove it. And it can live on in other places. It can it can live on, but I favor temporary, particularly when you're trying to get a message across. It also simplifies the process of making the statement, because if it's permanent, right, then it's much easier for the detractors to attack it and oppose it happening. When it's temporary, they kind of have to deal with it. So you can get it up, make the statement. And this is one of the beauties of working with an organization, an expert organization, is that oftentimes they can carry it on. So when we did the project with Pedro Reyes about with the Amnesia Atomica with the 30-foot inflatable mushroom cloud, that thing flew around rallies, music festivals all over the world. It became a tool that was used to to remind people about the threat of nuclear conflict.
So please, maybe we have microphones? Now we're recording and live streaming, so for our folks in the studio trays above, you know, the building is, it's lovely to see you all here. The building is a beehive of activity above us as well, so they're all live streaming. Yeah, just down here.
Hi.
Thank you.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Somebody else asking a
Apparently
question?
we have two microphones, so let's start. Let's
Okay,
start
thank
down
you.
here.
Yes, I wanted to say, make a couple comments and ask Patrick a question. I don't believe that art needs to be generate a certain kind of community action, because just by placing it makes art utilitarian, and art has a task, and that is to open imaginaries. And to open imaginaries changes communities, and we don't have to see this action. I don't have to see 10 people work together, plant some seeds, and go. It can change people permanently in ways that are radical. And speech can do that too. And I think that this conversation I was thinking, it's kind of confusing two different things, because some artists go to a community and intervene in that community, learn from that community what they want and try to express that with them, etc. But I think Patrick is speaking from within a community, and is already part of that community. And those signs, I wish I could put into words what those signs mean, but they speak about visibility of a community that is, even though the majority of Southern California, largely invisible. They speak of lives that are lost in labor, and lives that are lost in exploitation, and lives that are waiting for 30 years to have documents. And they speak out in ways that are really actually quite dangerous. I don't know if all the bodies feel the same kind of danger, but it is not easy for an artist to say defund ICE or deport ICE. And so I disagree with the idea that art should be intervening in a particular way in public space. I think that, on the contrary, one of the things that I'm really interested in, that I wanted to ask you, is about speech, because just as you say that neon forces you to be more minimalistic in terms of the imagery, you're also minimalistic in terms of the speech. And I have been watching you and thinking a lot about poetry, about haikus, about these minimal statements that you're making, condensing messages in ways that are really interesting. And I wanted to ask you if you have thought about your work as poetry, or have you ever thought about collecting your works, the neon works, into a book, and circulating it in that way?
I haven't really thought about, like, I don't know, like some of it I do think about like that, but it's more, I guess, speaking to the community as like or being useful in that way at a certain time, with the urgency at first, and then like when I'm unpacking and taking time to do that unpacking, I haven't gotten there yet, but I think that it could be powerful in that way if I think about it, right, and I do that work to even put it together in a book format. But I don't know. I do want to be poetic in the way I deliver and the way I think about how advertising is used, and use it in a way that feels right and feels human in the communities that I'm around, and deploying those methods. But that other use of like composing a book or some kind of is a great idea, and I haven't even thought about that, you know.
I'm glad you mentioned advertising. there are echoes of, Ed Ruscha and what's available in commercial vernacular communication. And a part of the brevity of these messages is a part of how they can be consumed almost subliminally, almost very quickly without cognition. Malki.
I want to respond to your comment. Thank you. I agree with many of the things you've said, but I also think that it will be a missed opportunity. I'm not going to enter into a conversation about what is art, but I think there is a lot of opportunities in trying to figure out together for us as a community of designers and artistic practitioners about how we can reimagine spaces that don't work and how to expand the public imagination and producing alternatives to what we have here. And I think your work is powerful, and what I've said is not directly speaks about your work, but really looking also into our institution and into our pedagogy and what is it that we do and how we contribute to the world and to the society around us, because we design the built environment at the end of the day. We design people's lived space, and the consequences of these design practices is broad and complex, and we need to be accountable and responsible for that. And I think there is a lot of space for us to still explore what we can do with this creativity and how we respond to all kinds of societal changes, both as institutions, as practitioners, and as members of this community who are facing, let's say at this moment, huge attacks against our freedoms and against, that is come across in the built environment, in public space, in our institutions that are being limited, and freedom of speech, etc. So we need to talk about this stuff.
Hi. I was just going to ask Malki, and you may have already spoken to this, but I'm not familiar with the term art in the public interest, and I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what that means to you.
It's actually a term that I borrowed from Mi-Won Kwon, and who is a curator, art historian, and she wrote a book, I think somewhere in the 90s, late 90s, about how art is changing, moving from this sculpture in public space that is produced in the mind of the artist to something that is much more relational and political and engaging with its environment. And this moment of change and theorizing this moment of change was very important, both for my practice and the way at least I teach the students about what is participatory design practices or artistic practices.
I'd like to point something out. I think that it's funny, the two questions came from an artist in the Triennial, Caledonia, Curry Swoon, as well as Beatriz Cortez, who's also in the Triennial. And I think that it's very important, for me as a curator, it is about balance. And I think that I would never dare to define what art is, and even less what it should be. I think that artists are out there to do their work and put it where they fit best. And my job is to look and see what works where and to do it. And I think, advocacy and raising awareness, obviously I'm into that, I am. But I also love work that inspires, that helps us see the world differently. And, one of Beatriz's work, Nomad 2, is this really fascinating speculative narrative about a spaceship, a vessel from outer space in the shape of a whale vertebrae. And it makes you think about our relationship with nature. And I think these types of work are critical for a triennial, because I don't know how many of you saw not this Berlin biennial, but the previous one. It was like getting punched in the face. It was really, really tough. And I'd always thought I'd wanted to do a show that was all about, action and change the world and atrocities. And I realized, no, I mean, it's really hard to swallow. It's not fun. And I think that there are other ways to engage the public and to inspire them. And I feel very firmly that it's up to the artists to create these works and to share them with us. And, our job is to contextualize them. Over here.
Hi, I am not an artist. I'm Stephanie May. I'm the minister at First Church in Boston, which is hosting 5 of Patrick's artwork. And yes, it was a slow process because it's church and things go slow sometimes. But what's interesting is, no one blinked an eye within the congregation about the message. It was all about, well, where are you going to hang it, and where do we have electricity, and and does it interfere with the other artwork that we already have outside and inside the building, and so we're feeling pretty good, we put it up, and wow, in one day the amount of pushback that happened, and it was I'm fairly new. If you're not familiar, this is Back Bay and the residential part of Back Bay. So we're on Marlborough Street in Berkeley. So we're surrounded. I mean, there are some other public institutions, a library across the street, but there's a lot of residential places, and we just immediately got all kinds of pushback, and almost daily I cross paths with somebody from the neighborhood or the church who has some comment. But what's interesting to me, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this, is, so I came tonight to, what do I say to people about public art? We just thought it was a good thing to do. We've been advocating for affordable housing for years, but so much of the pushback has been framed primarily around the neon, not the message. And I'm curious if you think that that's people that they don't feel safe to speak against the message. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's happened to me before with projects that dealt with the legacy of slavery, where people were commenting about an artwork that was in a field and it was a scar on the landscape, and they just weren't. They couldn't attack the horrors of slavery. And I think, I would guess that this is it too. People are uncomfortable with it. The owner of Miracle of Science, when I asked him to put up, I wanted something that was a little more about homelessness. And he said, yeah, you know what? I can't do that. I said, well, why not? He said, look, we're a restaurant. Every once in a while, a homeless guy will come in and lock himself in the bathroom for 3 hours. That's a problem, right? I've got customers who want to pee, so I can't do something that is welcoming homeless. I want to be supportive, but this is what I am willing to do. So thank you very much for what you're doing, and for sticking with it. I appreciate it, and it's very important, because I feel like, when we talk about, what's happening in the country, right, and fear and censorship and all of these things, it is, and the corporatization of public space, right, it is, and the lack of independent spaces, it turns out churches, way to go. So thank you.
We should, I think we should probably acknowledge that, churches and religious organizations, communities in this part of the world, maybe less in Mexico, have a long history of social protest movements, whether it's abolition of slavery or women's suffrage or LGBTQ plus rights, among other things. So, Patrick, I saw you react viscerally to this notion about it's about the neon. Sienna told me the same thing earlier. She's like, no, it's not about them, it's the neon. That's what gets to people.
Yeah, I guess that's the first thing one can complain about, because if it's in a community, then it's, the lights that contaminate, it affects certain things, and people, it's an easy kind of pushback. But, for sure, I think it's for sure the messaging. But I don't know, whatever, some people, want to have, it's temporary too, so. Yeah, it's Yeah,
put up with
and-
it for a little while.
And some people can deal with that, and maybe it'll change their day, or I don't know. But it's not something that they have to live with throughout. So it's something that we say, I think, when we push back, and it's not. Yeah, I think it's low hanging fruit. It's like something that that bothers their day to day, and they think it's that, but it's subconsciously it's the messaging for sure.
I mean, its ability to subconsciously signal, class immediately, and what kind of neighborhood is this anyway that I own? Exactly. Maybe time for down here.
Yeah, I have a question, maybe both for Pedro and Patrick. Triennials and biennials are by nature repeating events, and it seems like this is maybe an advantage in that you can learn from yourself over iterations, but at the same time you also have to be at least moderately well behaved so people don't get annoyed over time. I'm curious how you think the format impacts the efficacy or like nature of public or political art, like in doing so through the triennial.
I have 2 boys, right? And the only reason we could have a second one is we forgot what a pain it is to have the first one. So I think 3 years people will forget, right? And will remember the hype. Honestly, the triennials did an excellent job building strong relationships and sticking with their partners and all of that. But I do feel that a lot of it is the way it's presented, and a lot of it is the strength of the partnership. So I do feel very strongly that people will actually be more eager to do things. And because, this contrasts to the floating pink babies, right? And I think that, people, the work will resonate. And I think there will be a lot more interest now. So I think it'll actually be easier in the future moving forward, because the first question people would ask is like, what's a triennial? And then, the first one I think is the toughest.
It's in the messaging too, right? It's not the easiest to digest, and but I think if you put it out there and we try and we take some risks, then like Reggio was saying, the next time around, the messaging or people are kind of not maybe shocked, or not that they're not going to push back, but they're not just kind of angry with you, or there's other artists that are going to be invited and showing in 2028, and I think that we set it up for other conversations to be had, and with the installation and other installations that are happening. Yeah, that event.
I'd like to add one more thing about that often, and this is for the minister, actually, the people who complain the loudest are going to come back at you when it's gone and say, why'd you get rid of it? I loved it. So that's happened to me several times, not always, but that people who were the most critical when it's time to go by are the most, to take it away, are the most critical about it being gone. So it is art does transform.
Last one down here on the aisle.
Thanks so much for this conversation. I'm sitting here thinking just about how you conceive of aesthetic frameworks for this type of work, for art in the interest of the public, social practice art, the artwork that lives in public spaces. I'm just wondering if you might be able to each comment a little bit on that.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it, for me, comes from speaking to artists, and very selfishly, the opportunity. So I had never had the opportunity to work with Beatriz, for example, and I was super excited to work with her, and this presented a great opportunity to develop a project that was meaningful to her. And the project changed over time. Beatriz had in a trip to the Arctic, she saw a boneyard, which shifted the project to be about whales, right? And the use of whale body parts and for industry, and Whereas with Callie, who's also here, I've known her for 20 years, and it was, her project. My idea for her project was based on an essay I wrote during the pandemic about trauma and addiction, and the impact it has on lives, and the fact that Judith Herman, a psychiatrist, and Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate, well, Judith Herman and Bessel van der Kolk, who are both based in Boston, changed her worldview. So it comes about much more organically. It's really about thinking about these things and what artists are doing, and then the projects that didn't work, the artists that just, it just didn't work. I'm not going to say who they are, but some things didn't work. So, put it on the back burner.
I think that the work that I make is kind of set up for social kind of interactions, and kind of, because I'm taking from, that kind of aesthetic, almost like an aesthetic that's been kind of overlooked, but is familiar to all of us. And it's just a tool and a method and a medium that I can do to kind of speak to people in a way that trying to start a conversation about something that's tough to talk about. So I feel like the aesthetics that I'm using kind of they deal with they're already public in a sense, So I'm kind of positioning them to kind of speak about some heavy topics, or in this case, the unhoused.
Thank you for this question. I think there are many interests in play. For my response for this work, when we are talking about art and activism, I draw on the work of Bruno Latour, Hannah Arendt, some feminist scholars, that to build this framework. Like, what does it mean to occupy a public space? Do you have responsibility when we occupy this public space, and how we can best contribute to that space in a very kind of a situated way. And this situatedness is also part of this framework. So you respond to context, and you do it through a participatory process, and it is engaging also with the public or the publics that use this public space. And I think this is very briefly a framework that I feel should be at least regarded as foundational when we speak about work in public space.
Please join us next Wednesday, the 22nd, for Jeannie Gang and Elizabeth Cohen, their launch of Harvard Design Magazine 53, Reuse and Repair. Pedro Alonso, Malkit Shosho, and Patrick Martinez, thank you so very much.